Hey guys, welcome back. In the last couple videos on our Series 65 test prep, I went through the bond seesaw and a basic overview of discounted cash flow, and I wanted to finish up this little three-part series talking about a related concept when we're considering the time value of money, and that is NPV and IRR, net present value and internal rate of return. And on the Series 65, you might expect to have 1 to 3 questions on each of these, and they probably will not be math intensive. So in today's video, it's going to be more conceptual. What do you need to understand about NPV and IRR in order to pass these Series 65 on your first try? I'm going to keep the topic of discussion simple because many of you that are taking these Series 65 are not finance majors. We're not finance majors in college. You might not be a CFA. You don't need to understand NPV and IRR to that depth in order to pass the basic questions on a Series 65, but you do need to understand the general concepts, and that is what I hope to convey in today's video. Let's begin by talking about net present value, and we're not going to go through this whole thing. This was from the last video on discounted cash flow, calculating a total present value. I just want to focus you on the result at the bottom of the screen. Using this question, we came up with a present value of this corporate debenture of $934.50. And once that present value has been determined, the next question that you might logically ask yourself is it a good investment considering the current price, which is often going to be different than the present value? NPV can help you answer that question because it compares the bond's present value to that market price. The formula for NPV is very simple. It's the second line on your screen here in green. NPV equals present value minus the investment cost or the market price if we're looking at a bond. Let's recall that $934.50 present value and assume, we're looking at a bond that has a market price of $925 if we were to go out and buy it today. Using our NPV formula, we take the present value minus the cost or the market price, and we come up with a positive NPV of $9.50. A positive NPV lets you know that the investment is a good deal and that in this case, the bond is underpriced by $9.50. On the flip side, the other thing you need to understand conceptually is if the NPV is negative, it indicates that the investment's returns are worse than the market average and that it is overpriced. Couple of key concepts here. What is the NPV formula? Present value minus investment cost. And what does it tell us if the NPV result is positive or negative? Make sure you understand positive NPV indicates a good deal, negative NPV the opposite. We just talked about item number 1. Let's move on to item number 2 here. Some key concepts to remember for the exam, because you might get some questions asking you to compare investments based on net present value. And they're going to give you the numbers. You got to pick which is the best one. If an investor is doing a discounted cash flow analysis on multiple investments, the one, obviously, I hope to you by now, the one with the highest positive NPV would be the one that would be ideally purchased. And a final concept to remember for NPV in terms of the Series 65 test is, as it says in bullet item number 3 here, an NPV of 0 indicates an investment is appropriately priced. And normally this is what we would expect to see if the market is operating efficiently. Moving over to the concept of the internal rate of return. Look, if you're studying for a finance class or to become a CFA, you're going to need to spend a lot more time understanding internal rate of return. I want to keep it as simple as I can for you in thinking about what do you need to know about IRR to pass the Series 65. The textbook definition is useful to know, obviously, for IRR. It is the discount rate that results in the NPV, net present value, of all future cash flows being equal to 0. I'll have a picture of that explaining it in just a second, but make sure you memorize this definition. The IRR measures an investment's overall rate of return. It focuses on the specifics of the investment and not external forces such as inflation or other market risks. And finally, it is useful to remember that typically we use IRR for assessing investments with predictable cash flows like bonds or certain projects. Here is a picture just to kind of hammer home the general concept. If we are thinking about a $1,000 investment that in 1 year is going to yield $1,100, what is the return required to get that final outcome, that future value? That would be, in this very simple example, the internal rate of return. Can you guess what it is? This one is fairly easy because it's just 1 year, not multiple years. It is 10%. You are correct if that is what you guessed. And then we use that IRR and we compare it to a benchmark, or sometimes you might hear it called a hurdle rate or the minimum required return. And I just made one up for the sake of this example. Let's say that you were working on a project or considering investments where you had a minimum required return of 8%. And in this case, the IRR is 10%. It is greater than your hurdle rate. So this is what we would classify as an attractive investment. Because an internal rate of return on a multi-year investment can be difficult to calculate, you're not going to need to calculate them for the Series 65. And it is just useful to remember, as I said, that the IRR is the discount rate that results in the NPV of all future cash flows being equal to 0. What else do you need to know? These last 2 pages are really what I want you to memorize, or make sure you're focusing on understanding as you use your study materials. Hopefully you have Achievable link down in the video description, or some similar tool to help you prep for the Series 65. Key concepts: understand internal rate of return. It is used to evaluate the profitability of an investment and compare it to other investments. It is the discount rate, as we discussed in previous slides, that makes the net present value of an investment's cash flows equal to 0. You must understand how to interpret the IRR. If the IRR exceeds the cost of capital, the hurdle rate, the benchmark rate, then the investment might be considered an attractive investment. And finally, you must be able to distinguish IRR from other metrics or measures like the NPV, yield, or total return. For example, if the NPV on an investment you are considering is positive, that means the IRR is higher than the market return. And if the NPV is negative, that means that the IRR is lower than the market return. A couple of other tricky little things just to stick in the back of your brain, because they might show up in some fashion or another as a tricky test question. The bonds IRR is equivalent in definition and might be used interchangeably on the test as yield to maturity for a bond. As I say in green here, the exam may use these terms IRR and YTM interchangeably. Second bullet item here: net present value and IRR are not typically associated with securities like common stock. We usually use them to evaluate bonds or investment projects. However, NPV and IRR can be used for preferred stock because most preferred stocks pay dividends and they have a fixed, predictable dividend rate. You might see a question, asking something about NPV or IRR related to common stock. Just remember, those don't usually go together, and if they're talking about stock, you'd want to remember that they could be used for preferred stock. That is all I have for you on this video. I want you mostly to focus on the pages that have a lot of text on them. I know it is irritating to memorize a lot of text, but the concepts here are what are important, not trying to memorize how to do math. There's just not that many math questions on a Series 65 test. Hopefully you found this brief overview helpful. To get access to all of the study materials that I use for my Series 65 and the course that I recommend that you guys use, there is a link down in the video description to Achievable. With Achievable, you have access not only to the full textbook to help you study for the exam online at your desk or on your phone, but you have access to up to 20 full-length practice exams and review quizzes after each set of material. There is a link in the video description down below. Click on that to get started with Achievable. Good luck on your Series 65 exam. If you have any questions about NPV or IRR or taking the test in general, please be sure and drop me a question down below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys on the next video.